This is the Dallas Morning News.
Well, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
I remain Evan Grant.
And the Rangers had a great road trip, as we kind of talked about a little bit last week, but then they went into Cleveland, won 2 out of 3, came home, lost 2 out of 3 to the Tigers, and find themselves again in second place. But as we tape this today, they are a playoff team through 90 games.
Yeah, no one in the division has taken control, really, John, and the wild card remains wide open. But one question is going to remain for the next 3 weeks, and that is, will the Rangers be buyers or sellers this season?
And our guest this week is the perfect person to be able to address that question, Rangers President of Baseball Operations, Chris Young.
Young is in his 4th season in this role, John, as you well know. He was named the general manager in 2020 under John Daniels. They became partners going forward, and then he took over in 2022. The Highland Park High School product also played the first 2 years of his 13-year big league career with the Rangers and has won 2 World Series, one as a player with Kansas City and one with the Rangers as the chief operating officer or the president of baseball operations.
I'm looking forward to catching up with CY going into the month of July here for baseball operations people with the draft and then with the trade deadline. MLB doesn't do their clubs any favors with that schedule. But after that, in the archives in Arlington, in tribute to Jacob Latz, who is the Rangers' lone all-star as we tape here today, and his remarkable run to this position. We're going to look at other Rangers over the years that you might say, that guy, how did that guy become an all-star that season?
And listen, this is the boilerplate disclaimer here that if you want to reach out to us about baseball or me about burgers, which I just unveiled my latest project with Sarah Blaskovich on DallasNews.com. You can reach out to me on X at Evan_P_Grant. You want to talk baseball and presidents or what voices you may or may not hear on KRLD, you can find John at Ranger Blake.
Yeah, I have quite a wide
quite
range
a diverse,
of
a lot of interesting.
It doesn't involve food. As you get older, that becomes less of a thing. That's a story for another day. But anyway.
Bottom of the 9th, bases loaded. Here comes Jimmy Dale from Baker Brothers Plumbing, AC, and Electrical.
Thanks, Chuck. When your home pitches curveballs, Baker Brothers knocks it out of the park.
Home run, Baker Brothers. Incredible.
As the official home service partner of your Texas Rangers, we're offering $300 off a tank or tankless water heater.
Another winning call. Visit callbakernow.com or dial 214-342-1171 today.
Baker Brothers.
Great service.
We're going to get into this a lot with Chris Young, but just kind of looking at it, Evan, where the club is, it's a 500 team as we tape this, both overall and at home. The division, nobody has opened up any kind of real space. Seattle will play pretty well for a while, and then they won't. And kind of, if you look at the All-Stars, it kind of shows you what the division has been like. 4 of the 5 teams have one All-Star as of now before replacements. Only the A's managed to get 2 All-Stars, 2 starters, by the way, as it's going to work out. But, and you'll talk to this, you'll ask CY about this, but where is this club right now? And again, it all comes down to a lot of it to the health of Corey Seager and Wyatt Langford.
Yeah, 100%. And look, both those guys have missed 40 games at this point in time or more, and it's hard to win without your 2 best players. And we'll talk to Chris about that. The other thing is the Rangers have survived this ridiculous first half road schedule. They came home, and when the start of the Detroit series, I think they've got 16 of 19 games leading into the last week of the before the deadline at home. It is time to go. The Rangers are 20-20 at home as we tape this. They've got the Angels, the woeful Angels, in town this week, who I think did Perry Minasian and Arlington Boy a favor by letting him go so he didn't have to deal with Artie Moreno any longer, but the Angels are struggling. And then the Astros come in for a big 3-game series leading into the break. After that, you go to Atlanta for 3 games, and then you've got another week-long homestand against the White Sox and a huge 4-game series against Seattle before you go back out on the road.
And we'll see if that gives Chris Young and his baseball operations group any kind of feel for what they'll do at the break. And I don't know. These kind of seasons, and they seem like with the parity in the American League and in baseball this year, it is really tough for clubs to decide which way to go. If you look at the wild card, there are right now, I think there are 7 teams in the American League within 3 or 4 games of the playoffs right now, and we'll see if it shakes out here over the next couple of weeks. But it just becomes harder and harder to decide what to do.
The only teams in the American League that are more than 5 games out of the wild card race are Kansas City and the Angels. And then in the National League, the only teams that are more than 5 games out, there's only one team that's 5 games out of the playoff race, and that's Cincinnati. So, yeah, it's almost as if there's actual competitive balance in baseball. So, like if owners had an argument that there was no competitive balance, it almost kind of defeats that, but that's maybe a story for another day. In the meantime, the Rangers have an opportunity here, and they have done a very admirable job of getting by without their best lineup. They need their best players back, and they need them to contribute, and it's that simple.
And you've talked, as you say that, guys like Nicky Lopez, Elias Diaz, and you could go down the list of guys that are filling in for guys that are hurt. But you get tough starting pitching, and the Rangers saw it on Sunday with Casey Mize, who come off the injured list and put up 2 very good starts. Those are the games where you really do need your best hitters performing in your lineup, and that seems to be what you kind of see what's lacking right now. Although,
yeah. I mean, I just do feel like the Detroit series was important to win 2 out of 3 there, and you didn't. Now we're just talking about a 1-game difference. But if you're looking at 2 points in the season for me that are critical right now, that are keeping the Rangers from being in first place and with a somewhat commanding lead, are how poorly they played against the Astros, Colorado, and the Angels in a 13-game stretch early in the year when Houston was not playing well. And I think that this Detroit series had the ability to be a tone setter for the rest of this big home stretch, and they didn't play well. So hopefully after the off day and with a weak team coming in here in the Angels, the Rangers get a little bit refreshed because, again, they did play 15 straight in 15 days, had a weird off day on Friday, blah, 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 blah. But now it is time to go. They need a strong week going into the All-Star break and need a strong push coming out of it.
And let's talk a little bit about the rotation. And Jack Leiter's injury was a big one. The Rangers did not have a lot of depth, starting depth going into the season. They've plugged Cal Quantrill in there, but hopefully they're getting back some reinforcements. Between Jordan Montgomery and Cody Bradford and Jack Leiter, how do you see those guys, where they are in their rehab and everything, and what kind of contribution do you expect over the next couple of months?
Look, I think Jordan's first 3 rehab outings have been mostly about, just getting back on the mound and into the competitive groove because he had missed so much time. But I think that, he's probably got 2 more rehab outings at least. Yeah, he's probably got 2 more rehab outings at the very least. And it's time to see him start to really dial in. His last outing wasn't all that great. But if you get these guys back, it gives you a lot of different ways to address needs. I think that the Rangers have a need for a right-handed leverage guy in the bullpen. I think the Rangers have a need for a right-handed hitting center fielder. But to the point about the right-handed leverage guy, You could also use a lefty. And if both Montgomery and Cody Bradford come back and they're healthy, one of them probably ends up in the bullpen as kind of a multi-inning guy who's a real weapon for you. Capable of getting you more than 3 outs. And maybe that guy becomes kind of your linchpin if your starters aren't going to go terribly deep. If your starters are going to go 5 or something like that. The other possibility is, and we haven't talked really with anybody in the Rangers organization about this, but I will bring it up and I will bring it up later in the week. Do you consider moving Kamar Rocker as your into the bullpen if both of those guys are healthy and performing, as maybe your kind of right-handed leverage guy? I don't know that the Rangers would look at that as a long-term fit, but I think if you're talking about the stretch run, maybe that is a good fit for you. So I think the most important thing is if these guys get healthy, it gives the Rangers different ways that they can deploy different weapons.
And we'll talk a little bit about that with our next guest. Our guest this week, Rangers President of Baseball Operations, Chris Young, as we said, in a very stressful time of the month here with the upcoming MLB draft starting tomorrow as this podcast. They moved the draft to Saturday this year in the afternoon. This draft keeps bouncing around depending on what TV network puts up its hand to televise it. And then the trade deadline coming up on August 3rd. And of course, Chris now became the general manager here in December of 2020, took over running the baseball operations in August of 2022. Former Major League pitcher, started his big league career right here in Texas, and we'll talk to Chris next. Our guest on this week's edition of SportsDay Rangers is Rangers President of Baseball Operations, Chris Young. And happy to have him here to talk about what's happened in the first 90 games or so and what's to come. So, Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, John, Evan, thanks for having me.
So I'm going to just kind of start because I'm sure Evan has got very hard-hitting questions. And maybe not quite the hard-hitting guy. So we're roughly 90 plus as we take this 90 games into the season. Club has a 500 record both overall and at home as we tape this. But with the injuries and all the roster moves you've had to make, a new coaching staff, new manager coming in with his culture, new philosophies, what would you say? And I know as your role is basically looking ahead at this point, but just looking back for a minute, what would you say where you are and what your feeling is and how you stand?
Well, I'd say, first of all, I'm very happy with the staff, with Skip, with his staff. There's been a lot of change, and anytime you have change, there's uncertainty. And it takes a little time for familiarity to set in and everyone to understand their respective roles. I would say from a front office to a coaching staff perspective, we have 100% alignment. It has been wonderful working with Skip and his staff. The communication, the collaboration has been tremendous. And, you know, I think it's put our organization in a very good spot. We certainly, with our record right now, 45-45, 590 games in, I wouldn't say that's where we wanted to be necessarily in terms of, you know, we'd love to be 10 games over and in first place. But the reality is, given the injuries that we've endured and some of the challenges we've faced, you know, we're right in the thick of things. So I think from that standpoint, it's a victory. Now, looking ahead, my belief is we have not played our best baseball yet. And to play our best baseball, we're going to have to get healthy. I think that's the critical aspect to this. And so, you know, where we are right now, I would say like we're starting a 70-game season or a 72-game season, and it's a race to the finish line. And if we can be, you know, 10 games over the next 72 games, we're a playoff team, just with the standings and where the American League is right now. So if our best baseball is ahead and we play to the level that I believe we are capable of with the team we have, we've done some things very, very well. We've also seen some areas where we can continue to improve, but I think getting Corey Seager and Wyatt Langford back are going to be ways just that we're going to have internal improvements. And if we can do that, I feel very good about where we are. But overall, in terms of the health of the organization, I'm very, very happy with the staff, the changes, their communication, and the way they have attacked this season and put our players in the best position to be successful.
See, I want to hit on all of those elements of the future, but one thing before we go any further is, look, for me, the most standout story of the first half of the year has been Jacob Latz. And, when you guys moved him to the bullpen at the end of spring, I thought he had earned the starting rotation job, and I was going to be real curious to see how it played out. Um, it's played out, I think, even better than you guys could have imagined. Can you talk about how Jacob has kind of grown in your eyes and what you've seen this year as he's transitioned into a closer's role?
Yeah. So, Evan, I'd back up and start with one, you're right. We did not envision Jacob pitching the ninth inning for us coming out of spring training. We thought that he would be a multi inning leverage reliever, which is unbelievably valuable and important. And he would eventually transition into the rotation and be a very good starting pitcher. I do believe if he had been in both of those roles, he would have equal success. And I say that because I'm a huge fan of Jacob Latz, the person. There's nobody in our organization who embodies the winning traits and attributes like Jacob does. I mean, he's as good as it gets. There are others that match that, but Jacob is one who is unbelievably diligent and taking care of himself. He does everything he possibly can to be successful, and that's all you can ask for as a coach, as a front office member. You just want to invest in people who are going to do everything they can to be successful, and Jacob embodies that. And so the success he's having is not necessarily a surprise to me. The role certainly is different than we envisioned coming into the season, but I would tell you that he would be successful in any role on this team, on the pitching staff, because of who he is and the talent that he has. And he's realizing that talent at this point. So I'm so happy for him. I think the second piece of this is just goes to show as a front office, and there are a lot of organizations that are in similar spots. You come into the season with plans and you think that you've got players identified for respective roles. And oftentimes we focus on that ninth inning role, the closer role, and probably 30 teams, 15 of them come into the season with a defined closer, and 15 of them don't. And by a month in, it's all rearranged for every team or most teams, and those roles have shifted and changed. And I think this year is no example, is a perfect example of that. It's no different. And it shows that when you get talented players, they sort of find their niche, their role, and they can handle different situations. And we've seen that with Jacob this year, and he's been phenomenal at the back of the bullpen.
There's just one other thing before we get into talking about the deadline. When we talk about the team element, this goes under reported a little bit on occasion, but the work you guys have done on the pro scouting side to land guys who have contributed, like Nicky Lopez and Elias Diaz, over the past 2 months, just off of waiver type moves, and even Chris Paddock giving you a serviceable outing. What can you say about the work that your pro scouting department has done to identify and get guys who really fit and have brought something extra?
Yeah, Evan, it's it's the job of the front office to continue to leave no stone unturned in terms of ways to continuing to improve the roster. And you hope that you don't have to go to the levels that we've done this year in terms of some of the roster moves and the turnover. That said, we've experienced a lot of injuries, and some injuries to key positions, and often at times where they come in, in bulk, so to speak. We've had, we lost Michael Hellman and Evan Carter in the same game. And so we're without a center fielder at that point. So there's been a lot of challenges that we faced. And I'll go back to sort of the health of the organization, the front office. The pro scouting department, the R&D department, the baseball ops group, everybody working together collaboratively to really pitch in and find ways to make this team better and come up with solutions. And that's what our job is. We're highly competitive. We want to win. We have said this time and again that our fans deserve a winning team. And so it's up to us to, work tirelessly to try to provide that. And, sometimes we feel helpless because we try to make these moves. Either they don't work out, or you just don't have the impact or results that we had hoped or anticipated. That said, it's not for a lack of effort. And oftentimes, over the past several weeks, we've had a number of transactions And Ross and I were talking about, those are only the transactions that you see. You don't see those are only 10% of the transactions that happen. You don't see the preparation for 90% of the stuff that doesn't happen. And so I commend Mike Parnell, our pro scouting director, Ryan Murray, head of our R&D department, Cole Figueroa, Josh Boyd, our assistant GMs, and of course, Ross Venstermaker, Michaeline Curtis, who oversees our transactions and roster management. It's been a complete team effort upstairs and every respective department contributing. And, again, I think we're in a good spot where we sit today. But nobody's satisfied, and we've got to keep working and pushing to try to make this roster better to give us a chance to have a playoff push.
And I think sometimes too, because and having done this for so long, trying to integrate these guys into your team right away too, and have them contribute right away. That goes under the radar sometimes of the job of the coaching staff and Skip to be able to do that.
Yeah, John, thank you for pointing that out, because that's part of the alignment component, is that we can acquire players, but if we don't do a good job of explaining to the staff how those players should be used and explaining what their respective strengths are and what we believe they can contribute, the ways they can contribute, and how we should deploy those players, because our job as an organization is to put the players in the best positions to be successful. And I always say, when a player fails in a spot where he shouldn't be, that's on us. That's on us as an organization. And so our job is to identify the right types of people, the right types of players, the need, and then put them in positions to be successful. And so it's a collaboration between the front office and the coaching staff to do that. And there are just so many voices that contribute to that. And the coaching staff has done a phenomenal job of taking players like Nicky Lopez and Elias Diaz and Chris Paddock, Joe Ross, Cal Quantrill, guys that we weren't expecting necessarily contributions from and or significant contributions, and putting them in positions to help us win games. And unfortunately, some of those guys have been taken off the roster. My hope is that we're going to have those guys contribute again at some point.
So, CY, as we sit here, you're basically 4 weeks out from the deadline. And I think after the Miami series, and you and I had talked a little bit after that, but I think after the Miami series, you had 32 games, 20% of the season remaining until the deadline. And I posited that I think you guys need to go 20-12 in that point, puts you about 4 games above 500 to really legitimize the idea of buying. Since then, you've gone 7-3. Do you need a more definitive idea in terms of where this team is to commit to either buying and adding, or maybe backing off and selling some pieces?
Well, the easy answer is yes. The realistic answer is that we may not have that. We may not have that until August 2nd. It's really hard to predict, Evan. And so I think we have to prepare for a number of different scenarios. Ideally, I'm an optimist by nature, but part of our job is risk management, so to speak, and protecting the downside. And so we've got to always prepare for if we get bad news on Corey or Wyatt, and maybe we have a little losing streak, which I don't anticipate, but nonetheless, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. So we have to protect against the downside and prepare. That said, the optimist in me wants to say that we have not played our best baseball. And I really believe in this group. I believe in Skip Schumacher and his coaching staff. I believe in our players. And I think that if we play our brand of baseball the way we saw on that road trip, that we can compete with any team in the league. And I think our record against 500 teams is indicative of a good team, a team that can beat good teams. I would also say that we haven't played at the level of consistency to establish ourselves as a true buyer at this point, because we haven't beaten some of the under 500 teams. So this is a big homestand for us. Coming out of the break, we've got a tough Atlanta team, and then we've got a lot of games at home in July, and we have an opportunity here to sort of start separating ourselves. And the reality is it's time to do that. My expectation is that we will do that. And as we try to do that, my hope is that it provides some clarity as to, where we go from a front office standpoint.
Yeah, as you guys sit here, the Detroit series started a stretch where you've got 16 of 19 at home leading up to the last week ahead of the deadline, and that concludes with 4 games against Seattle, which I assume will be a tremendous series. You have mentioned that you haven't played your best baseball yet. And you also are a big proponent or a big believer that it's not the best team that wins, but the team that plays the best. But I just want to ask you this. Can you play your best baseball without your two best players contributing significantly?
Well, I think we have seen us play very good baseball. We just went on a great road trip and won without our two best players. Can you sustain that, and can you win a championship without your all-star caliber players? I think that's very, very hard to do. And so the reality is we need Corey and we need Wyatt on the field. We need them to post and to play in the second half for us to be the team that we believe we can be. We certainly didn't come into the season planning on not having those guys. And at this point, by the time they each return, they will have played in less than 50% of our games. So I don't want to make this solely about them, but I think it's a huge component to predicting what we can become in the second half. And if we continue to play with the same grit, fight, effort, energy, and passion that we showed on this past road trip, and we do that with our two best players and Wyatt and Corey coming back, I believe this team can be a very formidable team in the American League. There's no doubt about that.
Chuck, so the injury to Jack Leiter obviously was a big blow because of the rotation situation right now. But he's doing better, right? You're encouraged there, and hopefully you'll get Jordan Montgomery back. But saying that, do you need your starters to go a little deeper into games to give the bullpen some relief?
Well, we are thinned out in the bullpen. There's no doubt about it, especially with Jacob Junis going down. We did get Chris Martin back, but we've got to be smart about how we utilize Chris and not run him into the ground as he's kind of building back up and getting back in game shape. So, starters going deeper in the game, John, is always a good thing for a bullpen. And yes, we would love to see these, a stretch here where they each go 7 innings and take some pressure off the pen. The offense can help with that too. If we have a couple offensive games where we score a lot of runs and create a large lead, it can take pressure off the bullpen as well. So, that's what I said, Evan. You alluded to it earlier. It's not always the most talented teams that win championships. It's the teams that come together in the right way. And when your hitting picks up your pitching, your starters pick up your relievers, and at times your hitters pick up your pitching, and so it's a balance. And my hope is that that's what continues to happen here. The last several weeks has been a lot of fun watching us play that style of baseball and seeing these guys play for each other. And they're going to be bumps in the road. There's no doubt about it. But if we play with fight and grit and effort and a team mentality, I believe that we can overcome that. So, the pitching piece, getting Jack, Cody Bradford, and Jordan Montgomery back, all within hopefully a couple weeks of each other here towards the end of the month, the beginning of August, that could, really do wonders for our pitching and the depth from a starting standpoint. Obviously, it'll help the bullpen. So I'm excited about that. If you add Corey and Wyatt in, and I may be getting greedy here, asking for too much with all these players' health returning, but I'd like to be optimistic about it and think the best is still yet to come.
Hey, Chris, as you always tell me, I'm a internal optimist. I believe you tell me that all the time. But we're gonna assume I'm very optimistic here. And so you guys are going to play really good baseball here for the next 3 weeks. In that scenario, I've posited that, your top needs are to add another right-handed leverage arm to the bullpen, kind of a strikeout type guy. I know you just care about outs, but I guess if I'm specifying, I would be strikeout guy, and maybe a right-handed hitting outfielder who could play some center field to help that platoon. Can you give us any insight into like what might be your priorities come the deadline?
Well, look, I think there's no secret. You've identified 2 areas of need. I mean, some of that, again, is contingent upon the rotation staying healthy. It's contingent upon Bradford, Montgomery, and Leiter coming back. We'll see where Robert Garcia is. I don't have an update on him yet, but, we would love to have Robert back pitching in a leverage role combined with Jake Latz and Chris Martin and Jacob Junis at the back of the pen. But yes, to get another leverage arm would be tremendous. To have another right-handed bat that could play center field, there's no doubt about it. Take some of the pressure off Evan Carter. and his, protecting him a little bit against left-handed pitching, that would be tremendous. So as you go around the diamond, obviously, catching, we're in a good spot. Berger at first. We've had really good play from different guys at second base: Nicky Lopez, Zeke Duran. Josh Smith has looked a little better here of recent. If we get Corey back at short, JJ at third, you would say the infield set: Wyatt, Carter, Nimmo, and so the complementary piece, at center field is something that would, I think, be a nice luxury, assuming full health.
Yeah, I don't think you guys are in the market for necessarily a needle mover type piece. It all depends on a lot of health. The one other element here that would make the trade deadline significant, last year you guys did add some money at the deadline. This year, and I've heard from a lot of fans based on the fact that payroll was pared back this year, do you believe that you'll be able to add some payroll at the deadline if that's necessary to really give this team a shot?
The answer is yes. And I say that because ownership has been unbelievable in terms of supporting us for the last several years in terms of that. And so, but it's, really incumbent upon the team to motivate ownership to do that. And we, at this point, in my opinion, have not done that well enough. But again, we've got a month here to go do that. And if we do that, I believe that, our ownership wants to win as much as anybody. But we're not going to be reckless with it. And certainly the team has to put us in a spot where we make it very clear this is our opportunity to go make this team better and give them a chance to win a championship.
Yeah, and as I think I said before we started recording, right, with this stretch of games at home, it's time to go. You guys have survived a really hard road schedule. You've survived some injuries to this point. It really is incumbent on this team right now over the next 19 or 20 games to get hot again.
Yeah, no doubt. I 100% agree, Evan. And we, over the last several years, have played well at home. We probably haven't played as well at home this year as we need to play. Good teams win at home. And my expectation is that now we're going to be in a spot to start playing well at home and separating ourselves a little bit.
My last question, and as we tape this, July now for baseball operations people has become a brutal month. I'm not going to get into the MLBs to see, a draft now is on Saturday afternoon this year, moving it from Sunday night. And you're right in the middle of draft discussions too. So it's just a real balancing act for you right now. And the Rangers, in some years with a top 2 or 3 pick, you're more engaged, obviously have to be a little more engaged there. But how do you guys balance all of that at this time of year? It's really hard.
Well, John, it's a team effort. The scouting department, the amateur scouting department has done a wonderful job. And again, this is not just one department within baseball operations. It's a collaborative effort. We have a strong R&D influence into our amateur scouting, really into every department. And so it's cross-departmentally, there's tremendous collaboration, there's tremendous leadership. And for me, there's no way I can manage all aspects of it. There's no way Ross Benstermaker can manage all aspects of it. So you got to have strong people and leaders within each respective department. Josh Boyd, Kip Fagg, oversee amateur scouting. They've done a great job. The culture of that department is so strong. I think we've drafted very, very well the last several years. I think you look at the homegrown players that we have on our team right now from both the international side and the domestic side. And some of those you don't even understand. We've used minor league players to acquire players, so that's been a win as well. But developmentally, I'm very happy with where we are. Player development has done a great job, and we're seeing contributions from a number of players that we've drafted and developed, Jacob Latz included. So it's really exciting. This is a fun time of year, but John, you're not kidding when you say it's a very stressful time of year. I tell my family, I'll see you in August, and we just hope to, put our heads down and plow through this month. And then after that, we'll come up for air. And at that point, kind of there's not much transactionally that we can do to improve the club. So we'll sit back and hope this thing comes together.
Yeah, but as hard as this month is, if your team on the field does a little bit of a sprint here, everybody goes into August with a completely new sense of energy. It
Exactly.
doesn't drain you at all. It just gives you that energy for the sprint.
There's no doubt. And I look back at 2023, Evan, and our first 60 games, I think we were 40-20 in that time span. And then we hit a really rough patch and we had some injuries and we got to the deadline and you could argue the arrow was down, but we decided this team was worthy of improving, and we went out and made some big moves. And the team, I think, had responded with like an 8-game win streak at that
straight,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, and then we did hit a really rough spell right after that, and then kind of came out of it and got healthy. I think that was the key component on that 23 team. That when that team was healthy, we had established ourselves as one of the best teams in baseball when healthy. And I compare that to where we are right now. We're a 500 team. But is there a stretch in there? Is there a 60-game stretch where we can play, 15 games over 500? And I think if health comes together, there's no doubt in my mind that is possible. That's conceivable. We just haven't had it yet. And it's always easier when that happens at the beginning of the season and you establish yourself as a clear winner. But the reality is there are a number of teams going through it right now. The Yankees, the Braves, there's some teams that are really, dealing with some health issues like us. They just have gotten off to better starts. So now is it our time to get healthy and make a push? And my hope is that is going to happen.
All right. And so last thing, we just haven't asked for an update. Do you have optimistic or realistic dates for when you think you might get Seager and Langford both back in the lineup?
Seager, I don't have a hard update on him right now. Wyatt is trending very well. It looks like he will be ready right after the All-Star break. And so if we can get through this stretch, Wyatt will be out on rehab during the break. Probably have to go to Arizona and play in some games out there, but it's looking very, very good for Wyatt. And Corey, I'll have a better update this afternoon when he comes in after the off day. He was feeling a little bit better before the off day, and my hope is that we continue to make progress and get him back. But you cannot say the impact that those two would have. It's just so huge and critical to our team, and even just getting one of those guys back and having Wyatt in the lineup coming out of the break will be a boost. And hopefully the good version of Corey Seager is right behind him.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris.
Appreciate the time. Good luck. Well, with the All-Star break right around the corner and the All-Star game in Philadelphia next Tuesday, I thought we'd hit on the All-Stars this time. And with Jacob Latz being a first-time All-Star making the team, I don't think anybody in spring training thought that Jacob Latz would be the Rangers' lone All-Star 4 or 5 months later. But let's look at some of the more unlikely All-Stars in Rangers history. And prefacing this, you've got to remember, you long-suffering Ranger fans for many years, every team has to have a representative. And some years it was not that easy to find a representative for the Texas Rangers. And I will, as I get into this a little bit, and you've probably, fans, Evan, you probably got your own list of unlikely All-Stars. But let's just look at a few, and we will conclude with one that had a remarkable first half of the season in 1999. Jim Spencer made the All-Star team for the Rangers in their second season, 1973, and he wasn't even the only All-Star. Toby Harrah actually was selected that year as well. But Jim Spencer was a first baseman. You might remember he was not acquired by the Rangers until May 20th of that season from the California Angels. At the All-Star break, he had 3 homers and 32 RBIs and a decent .280 average, but was selected to the American League All-Star team, only All-Star selection ever, pinch hit in the game, and basically played 2 more years for the Rangers and was a reserve first baseman with Mike Hargrove coming on the scene. He is certainly on this list. Gary Ward in 1985 was my first year in Texas, and that team was brutal. I mean, we lost 99 games. Buddy Bell had been the team's all-star for like the past 5 years. Unfortunately, we had traded Buddy in May, so you looked at that team and you said, who is the American League going to pick to be on that all-star team? I think it was Sparky Anderson was the manager. And remember, in those days, reserves were picked by the manager. There was no player voting. There was none. It was fan voting for the starters. And then the manager had a really tough job, having to pick all these people and trying to appease teams and players. And Sparky
I believe
settled.
that whole program ended after the 2010 after the 2011 All-Star game, I believe, when
Right. That was the
Rangers
last.
manager Ron Washington did it, but it was you who picked all the subs.
I didn't pick them all in 2011, 2012, but it became muchy. I helped him, and we didn't win either All-Star game, so I quickly retired.
You did
as
a
being-
terrible job of
Right.
roster construction.
Tried to get a few Rangers on there, too. But anyway, Wardo at the All-Star break in 1985, Evan, had 5 homers and 40 RBIs to go along with his .282 average. But that kind of tells you where the Rangers were in those days. He was making a homecoming. He played for the Twins, and the game was in Minnesota. And one player that you'll remember was Roger Pavlik. And this is a 1996 team will be celebrating later this year with their 30th anniversary. We had 2 All-Stars on that 1996 team, and neither one of them was named Juan Gonzalez, who was the MVP of the season. Von Rodriguez, who was the All-Star catcher for 10 straight years as a starter, played in 13 total All-Star games. And then Roger Pavlik was the other right-handed starting pitcher, was the other Rangers All-Star representative that season. Now, Pav had a great start. He was 11-2 at the break, despite an ERA of almost 5. And again, in those days, you kind of looked more at the one-loss record. He did tail off in the second half, but he was among the American League leaders in innings, complete games, and wins at the break. But he was the Rangers' all-star selection that year with Pudge. And then 2 others, Evan, and 3 others, I think. Nelson Cruz in 2009 was a late selection to the All-Star team. I don't know if you remember this. Mike Trout got hurt, and Nelly had finished like 5th or 6th in the player voting, coming off a pretty good first half with 22 homers and 53 RBI. But I remember, I don't know how you remember, but I think we were all a little surprised he got picked to the team that year because it was a late selection.
Yeah, I don't remember that All-Star selection that well. But look, that was a year where Nelson really bloomed. He was a late bloomer, and he really kind of got out to a good start in 2009. And it was really the jump start of what ended up being a great career.
Yeah, and Josh Hamilton obviously was starting All-Star. Josh won, I think, 5 fan voting to start in the outfield. Alexia Gondo, and you mentioned the team 2011 All-Star selections, was a pick by Ron Washington as an extra pick, manager's selection after they did finish with the player voting to make the team. First year as a starter, was 9-3 at the break, and it really kind of blossomed. But that's the kind of guy that a manager can kind of, you try to take care of your players a little bit sometimes. Back in the day before MLB picked the whole team. And then the other one I would mention would be Martin Perez in 22. Again, not on a very good ball club, was 7-2 with a 2.68 ERA at the break. He was a Rangers selection, but also that year, Corey Seager made the team. So the Rangers had multiple All-Stars. And then the last one that I wanted to bring up was Jeff Zimmerman in 1999. And, Jeff Zimmerman, Rangers had signed Jeff Zimmerman prior to the 98 season. He had pitched 1 year in the independent Winnipeg in the Northern League, where I used to work at one time in my career. And he sent letters, he faxed letters, I believe, to all 30 teams asking for a opportunity. The Rangers signed him to a minor league contract. He was actually their pitcher of the year, minor league pitcher of the year in 98, came to spring training as a non-roster player, did not make the team out of spring training, came up very quickly when the Rangers had some injuries in the bullpen, and proceeded to go 8-0 with a .86 ERA in the first half of the season. There was one stretch, I think he pitched almost 29 and 2/3 consecutive scoreless innings. He had 26 consecutive scoreless appearances as the setup man to John Wetland, and he made the All-Star team. It was a great story at the time. He, Pudge, Rafael Palmeiro, and Wetland all went to the 99 All-Star game in Boston. Evan, you might remember that was the year Juan Gonzalez turned down the All-Star game because he was not elected as a starter. And I think Zim pitched a scoreless inning in the game. And I don't know if he's the comp to Jacob Latz, but again, a guy that you certainly didn't expect in spring training was going to be an American League All-Star.
Well, let's hope he's not the comp to Jacob Latz, because as great as Jeff's story was in '99, he was quickly out of the game 2 years later, because while his slider was a absolute miracle from
Right.
God,
Right.
it tore up his arm. And I think Zim now currently, I'd love to talk to him. Maybe we'll get him on the podcast sometime. But I believe his right arm almost now turns out to the right because he pronated his arm so heavily. But that was a great, great first half for him. And it is the easy comp that this is a guy who came in, didn't have a whole lot of heralding, took on incredible leverage innings in the bullpen, and just had an absolutely dominant first half. And you go back and look at that season overall, and this is a guy who held hitters to a 517 OPS and a 166 batting average. It was a miraculous season for him, and he was a great story. And I just unfortunate that his elbow just could not withstand the amount of stress he put on it with that slider.
Right. That slider kind of broke down, is what I talked to Larry Harding, the bullpen coach at the time, the other day about this. It broke down as more that broke across, right? That was kind of the pitch.
Yeah,
it was unhittable when it was
a
very hard to see. Right.
Sharper turn that broke down more than it broke horizontally. But yeah, I don't know if I wish I could demonstrate to people, just how much pressure he was putting on his elbow at that point in time. Either way, it was a great story then. It's a great story now. Here's to Jacob Latz and a great story in 2026, and hopefully many more chapters for him on that front.
Yeah, we wish Jacob Latz good luck at the All-Star game in Philadelphia next week, and we wish all of you a great All-Star break, and hopefully it will be a really strong second half here for the Rangers and get some of these players back, Evan, especially their two top guns. And we'll have lots of exciting things to talk about in the podcast in the second half of the season.
Lots of exciting things, John. Lots of exciting things.
And we will see you next week. Thanks for watching.